Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, what I wanted to do was to go into a bit more depth about my passion project, Wargaming the Russian Civil War. A few reasons why I'm doing it, but also why you should consider gaming the Russian Civil War. Then to explain some of the rules I'll be using, what miniatures, and then a kind of little look at how the project itself is going. It's certainly one of the niche periods out there, but as we'll get into, I think there are some fantastic reasons for why it makes a really good historical war game and a collection that a lot of people should actually think about picking up. So, why do I want to wargame the Russian Civil War? Now, it comes from an academic interest. I have a master's degree in modern history, and my focus was the political element of the Russian Civil War, particularly in Ukraine and its relation to the UK at the time. But actually, I think as a gaming point, it offers the ability to have World War I uniforms and tech, your kind of very first tanks, your canvas airplanes, machine guns being not as common, but also so much cavalry, without forcing you to do the trenches of the Western Front. I know there are wargamers out there, such as Storm of Steel, who are dispelling the myth of wargaming in the First World War always has to be trenches. But it just doesn't interest me particularly as a gaming perspective the same way the Russian Civil War does. Now, some of the larger battles were very similar to 1915 attacks of just kind of marching toward the trenches, but you get a lot of raiding and defences and subterfuge and intrigue that goes on as well. And when I mean the Russian Civil War, it's Russian Civil War. Firstly, the Civil War itself goes across the former Russian Empire, which encapsulates Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltic states, parts of Poland. So really there's many different nationalities involved. But also I like to include the Polish-Soviet War, the Polish-Ukrainian War, the civil wars that happened in Austro-Hungary, even up to really the German Civil War and the Spartacist uprisings. It's really about gaming kind of that instant, but those small wars that happened from 1917 to about 1926 in the fallout of the First World War. So I think really you have three choices when it comes to gaming the Russian Civil War itself. So you have, which my focus is, gaming the kind of Ukrainian Crimea front. Then you've got the Baltics themselves, and then you've got a lot of the fighting that happens up in the north. That really structures your collection, which I'll get onto later. But if you're a historical gamer who's looking for a period where maybe you could pick up 40, 50 figures aside and some different uniforms to paint, and it can be quite rules light and still have a good time, and the Russian Civil War is certainly for that. You have larger battles with thousands of soldiers each side, but you also have plenty of village raids and train station attacks, for instance. So we've decided to wargame the Russian Civil War, but then the question is, what scale do you do it in? There's a few options for this, and it was something that I nearly went down a different path. Now, as you can see, these are some excellent 28mm miniatures that I've got in front of me. But originally, I wanted to wargame it in 15mm. I did want to do skirmish and buy that individual figures, but Peter Pig has a good range for this. They created a Cossack range, which can be used for Ukrainians, Cossacks themselves, various different factions within the Civil War. And also you've got the Battlefront Great War range, which works for the interventionist forces, as well as a lot of the uniforms that were supplied by Britain or captured from Germany. So I was going to do it in 15mm, but I bought two of the starter armies by Battlefront. But really what changed it for me was this range, and it's a range I'm going to talk about quite a bit, by Empress Miniatures of Ukrainian infantry. Now, Ukraine and its attempted wars of independence are really the central focus for me within this project. And I'd only picked up one or two Empress figures before, but seeing them at shows, I mean, they just looked so lovely. And actually, if this is going to be a slow grow project, this could be the one that actually, all being 28mm metals, doesn't matter so much cost wise. And I can enjoy the painting and the researching, which really appeals to me with this period. So I ended up selling those Battlefront 15mm, but absolutely is a way you can go down. I also wanted to shout out that if you wanted to do more larger scale battles, so kind of company, battalion level, the Pendragon 10mm range is also worth looking at. But as I wanted to do individual figures, I'd rather stick with 28mm. The other thing that was helpful as well is that Wargames Atlantic have a range of plastic World War I infantry. These are the Russians, but they've got Germans, British and French as well, which are all really handy as I will go on to the project plan for it as well. But before we delve into what my project looks like, let's talk a little bit about rule sets as well. So the end goal of any wargaming project is to get a game on the table, and it really helps to know what rules you're going to be playing. There's not many rule sets specifically written for the Russian Civil War out there, and there's a few options though. So two that I will be using, so I've got Setting the East Ablaze here, which is a classic kind of pulpy style war game, which does a lot of what's if. I mean, you've got a Fiat 3000, well, not even Fiat 3000, but one of those crazy Italian super heavy tanks. So it's kind of a bit tongue-in-cheek in a way, but seems simple enough to play quite big games, as well as some smaller games. So I haven't played this, but I've read through it, and it certainly seems like one I want to do. The only issue being you need to create your own cards. It's card-based activation. And then the other one, which is going to be my main focus for the moment, is a lesser-known rule set, particularly in the UK here, and it's the Blood and Valour. So this is the World War I version by Firelock Games of Blood and Plunder. They're, I think, more popular, safe to say, kind of 17th century pirate game. At least I think it's 17th century, might be 18th. But anyway, they released a World War I game called Blood and Valour, and a pretty chunky here, this is End of Empires, pretty chunky supplement, all mostly focused around the Russian Civil War. If I turn to the back here, shows all these different army lists that they've got. I mean, they're actually more in depth than what they say here. They've even got Ukrainian lists, which is something I was looking for, but various red, white, green armies as well. Now, the reason why I wanted to pick this rule set up is it's designed to go on a 4x3 table. Now, it being a passion project, and this is niche, I'm going to be the only one in my gaming group that's going to have a collection for this. So I'll need to do both sides. And I think it's quite important that I have a way to paint up two smaller sides and a bit of terrain, but get it on the table. I find I'm always really motivated when I'm able to get a collection on the table, and it helps me paint more. So this is certainly a way to get them on the table fairly quickly. I have played a test game of this, and it was quite interesting actually, D10 generated, and there was a really nice mechanic around activation kind of betting, which was interesting, and I think it abstracts the idea of momentum in a way. I have seen some reviews that said maybe this loses the flavour of the First World War. I can understand that, but for the Russian Civil War and something a bit rules light, particularly as my opponents won't know much about the period, I think this is going to fit really well. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list of the rule sets out there. The other one you could consider is Through the Mud and Blood, the classic Two Fat Lardies rule set on that period. I managed to actually snag a physical copy of that, but having read through it, it did feel a bit too focused on the Western Front. I think there is a Russian Civil War expansion out there, but perhaps I wanted a bit of a lighter game. Absolutely, if you're a really big fan of the period, I can see that being an excellent rule set. But again, I think it suffers a little bit from that early Lardies game, that maybe they needed a bit more editing or a bit more flow. And the other ones I've seen is people kind of do their own chain of command or bolt action edits and kind of guest volumes. I didn't really want to spend a lot of time writing home rules. I am denied about writing my own set, but maybe that will come to when I've actually painted some figures. So speaking of painting figures, let's have a look at what I've actually got painted so far and what my plans for the project are. So here's everything I've painted so far. And it's a little bit meagre. This has been on the back burner and other projects have taken precedence. So I've got 4 White Russian soldiers. So these are the Wargames Atlantic plastics, and I've already shown them off in a hobby report a while ago. But they're quite nice models. What designates them as being White Russians rather than red is that they will have these shoulder boards here. So they're molded into the model, so I've scraped them off for any Bolsheviks. But really uniform, it's an interesting conversation because a lot of troops and armies were not very well uniformed, or there was a right mix. I've got another box of these guys, plus then a box of British to kind of do the solid of the whites. And then here, as I painted around Christmas last year, is the excellent Empress Miniatures World War and Ukrainians, sculpted of course by Paul Hicks. And they're just, yeah, gorgeous. I wanted to paint some Empress. I mean, look at the officer here. I've done them up. So these will be for the Ukrainian National Republic. So this is the 3rd independent Ukraine that comes out under Petlura. It's short-lived. They do a lot of fighting in early 1919. There's a lot of... Basically, what happens in Ukraine is they're not sure whether they want to fight the Reds and the Whites. They definitely want to fight the Bolsheviks, but lots of conflicting loyalties. And ultimately, this army is subsumed into the Polish army during the Polish-Soviet War and eventually disbanded in 1923 to 24. But I've painted these guys up as a kind of grey regiment. It's one of the 2 coat colours. They wore, well, some Ukrainian troops wore the traditional Ukrainian kind of Cossack style dress. I will integrate some in maybe Russian uniforms or some British uniforms, but also some Austro-Hungarian uniforms, particularly ones for Western Ukraine, as they were part of the Sich Riflemen, which was a unit in the Austro-Hungarian army. So I want to do a White Russian force, a Ukrainian force, and then of course it wouldn't be the Russian Civil War without some Bolsheviks. I haven't painted any Bolsheviks, but I've got some built. There's lots of research going on into this because what we know is a bit piecemeal, and I don't think there isn't that level of uniformity you get compared to uniforms of the Western Front. There was never that supply or logistics or bureaucracy and administration, but it really makes for a nice, fun painting challenge. So let's have a look at some, not all, of the figures I've got coming up to paint as well. So here's a little sample of some of the figures I've got in the painting queue for this project. So as mentioned, I'm using a lot of the Wargames Atlantic World War I Russians. They're plastic, they're a little bit cheaper. But this is a Bolshevik soldier, as you can tell, because I've cut his shoulder pads off. A bit of a tongue twister there. They were a sign of the kind of capitalist hierarchy, so all the Bolshevik soldiers would tear them off. He's got a piece of Bolshevik headgear on, but apart from that, very similar to the White Russian. I've then also bought some metal Bolsheviks. These are from Copplestone Castings, distributed by North Star. Quite nice, maybe a little bit flat, but actually when you've got these mixed in with the plastics, I think they're going to look quite nice. They certainly fit in scale-wise as well. Now, the good thing is Artisan, again, done by North Star, have been starting their own Russian Civil War range. And I picked up a pack of their Bolshevik commanders. So these kind of look a bit tattier compared to the white officers. Helps with, you need a few officers for both games. So certainly something that I'm glad to pick up, and I look forward to them adding their range. I have just seen that they've added some great coated infantry, which is fantastic because there wasn't really many options so far. And of course, I picked up some more Empress as well. They have a kind of small White Russian range as well, and look at the detail on this officer. He's got some medals, he's got an eye bandage on his head. Going to look fantastic as well. And this one here, has a French Adrian helmet on and a great bit of facial hair. as well. So looking forward to that. And I picked up my first vehicle, also by Empress. This is an Austin Putilov armoured car. Again, what I really like about the vehicles in this period is they look so just a bit rudimentary, really. This has got loads of rivets, these silly machine gun turrets. Yeah, it's going to look really nice painted up. And I have found a picture of a Ukrainian Austin Putilov armor car that had Petlura written all on the side. So that will be something to try with paint pens, but really excited to get that going. So this is certainly a project that's always on. You've noticed throughout the year that I've done a bit of focus on like the English Civil War, and now I'm focusing on more some medievals. But I've always got this in the back of my mind. I think this is something that maybe 5 figures a month would be great. But to get to the point where I have 2 painted forces and I can start putting games on for my mates as well. This is a passion project, so why not enjoy it? But also, it's going to be a slow grow, and I think it's recognising that. Really, really happy. I mean, you can't see, but I'm just smiling even talking about it. It's just such an interesting period to wargame. I'm glad there's actually quite a large range of figures out there in 28mm, and that range is growing. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you may be convinced to consider a bit of Russian Civil War action in your wargaming life as well. Or if you already gamed the Russian Civil War, please comment below as well. And you'll see these in more hobby updates, and I'll probably do a couple of more in-depth videos, maybe around the rules as well. So that's Wargamer of Kent, signing out.